Okay, perfect problem 2, Math 111. We're given a couple inequalities that we got to solve here, both tricky for different reasons. First one, because we got this absolute value sign going on. So the way you tackle this is you look at what you got inside these absolute value signs and you figure out when is this thing going to be non-negative. That happens if x is greater than or equal to 1. What we'll have here will be a non-negative number. And if that's the case, you just get the absolute value sign not doing anything. So we go down to here. But if x is less than 1, then what's inside here will be negative. So the absolute value sign will change the sign of all this stuff. And we'll get to this. So now we can solve these inequalities. Whoops, 1/2 x. Subtract half x from both sides, and you get 1/2 x. Add 1 to both sides, and you get 5. So you end up with x is less than 10. Over here, distribute the negative. And subtract half of x from both sides. And subtract 1 from both sides. And if we multiply both sides by -2/3, the reciprocal of this, we'll just get x on this side multiplying by negative, so you got to flip the sign around. And -2/3 times 3 is -2. So now to figure out our answer, we got to figure out, okay, when is x less than 10 and greater than or equal to 1? So that's everything from 1 up to 10, including 1, not including 10. And then over here we need x to be less than 1 and greater than -2. So that's -2 up to 1, not including either one. So our answer is this and this, which if you figure out the union of those two, it's everything from -2 to 10, not including either point. So in this case, if you had just looked at this line and this line, it would have worked fine. You would have gotten the same answer. But there are situations where ignoring this will change your answer. So it's a good idea to get in the habit of putting this up here. Now the second one, this one's tricky. It's really tempting to multiply both sides of the equation by x, but that's not what you want to do. And the reason why is because it's not an equality. With an inequality, if you multiply by a negative, it flips the sign around. And we don't know if x is negative or positive. So what we do is subtract 2 from both sides. To get something relative to 0. And then find a common denominator, which in this case is x. So this becomes -2x over x. So we can write it all over the same denominator. And what we are left with is this mess right here, which we can solve if you could factor out the top. A little bit tricky. Let's see, we want two numbers that multiply to -4 and add to -3. So -4 and +1. So we got 2x squared, -4, and +1. So maybe this is kind of an off to the side. Let's see, how can I write this? 2x squared minus 3x minus 2 equals this, which is equal to, we could factor out a 2x from here and get x minus 2. And then you don't have to take anything out of here. We already have x minus 2. So if you want, you can think about it as pulling out a 1. And then if you factor out an x minus 2 from both, you get x minus 2 times 2x plus 1. So since this right here is just the top, from here we can say that what we have is x minus 2, 2x plus 1 over x has to be greater than 0. And I think the best way to do this is to kind of make a number line and think about your critical points. So this is 0 when x equals 0. This is 0 when x equals 2. And this is 0 when x equals, what, -1/2 if you solve that out? Something like that. And then we can kind of build these little regions and figure out, okay, if we stick in a value of x less than -1/2, so -1, for example, this would be a negative, this would be a negative, and this would be a negative. Negative times, so negative, negative, negative. Maybe like that, which is a positive over a negative, which gives you a negative number. Over here, if we're in between these two values, what I guess like -1/4, this would be negative, this would be positive, this would be negative. So that ends up with a positive sign. Sticking in 1, negative, positive, positive, gives you a negative. Sticking in 3, positive, 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 gives you a positive. So we want to know when all this stuff is greater than 0, in other words, when it's positive. That'll be this region and this region. So our final answer will be everything from -1/2 up to 0, union everything from 2 up to infinity. This interval being this region, this interval being this region. That's the end.